Welcome to UberCube, the podcast will discuss all things Cube, but with refreshments. This is your host, Anthony Adams, aka UberBear, and today I'm joined by a very special guest.
Hey, it's Sam McKenna. How y'all doing?
And Sam is here because, due to technical issues, poison ivy, vacations, and normal life, etc., Team UberCube has had to temporarily split off into multiple factions, but I assure you in the next week or so we will get together, all three of us, the trifecta, the Triforce will reform and we will record together as a team. But we're just trying to get over this summer cycle, the going back to school and all the things. But we're not here to talk about that. What we're here to talk about is kind of a combination of small events focusing on the Capital Cube Championships, which I just recently attended, in addition to kind of the decisions that I made while in the Capital Cube Championships from a draft perspective. And Sam is going to take on the role of the person who has attended one of these events, in addition to looking at my card pools and my decision. So one more thing to celebrate too is I actually got to top 8, but we'll talk about that more here shortly. But before we go any further down this conversation, the one thing that we always do here at UberCube is we're going to enjoy our libations of the show. We're going to start by, what are you having here, Sam?
I am drinking a high-pitched Mosaic IPA from Highwire that you gave me. I appreciate it. It's a good one. It's local stuff.
And I myself, I'm having a Wicked, a Weed, a Freak of Nature. So let's go ahead and crack them open. And let's get to the show. So, this past weekend, I myself and my family, we traveled to Washington, D.C., where my family so graciously allowed me to participate in the Capital Cube Championships on August the 17th. And it was just an S-tier type of showing. I mean, our good friend Lincoln, who also attended the UberCubeathon, just did such a fantastic job of organization. And that's kind of what we're going to share here in combination with the experience, both from myself as the player, and then Sam's going to have feedback, etc., on the small events. So there's a little bit of something for everyone. This is going to be the potpourri of cube conversation, if you will, right? I always think of the SNL skit. Well, they're like potpourri. So anywho, let's kind of just talk about the overarching view. So Capital Cube Championships, as I said, was in Washington, D.C. And one of the things is what I appreciated that Lincoln did, he being towards the end of the line before we go to CubeCon 2024, in addition to Scott Mertz, it's doing the Upkeep New York, which is actually happening whilst we're recording today. They were able to kind of see the best practices, if you will. What worked, what didn't work in each one of these small events. Because that's one of those things that sometimes can often be overlooked. The logistical layout. What did you do to get there? What worked in your event? What was abysmal? What totally failed? What was your player feedback? Et cetera, et cetera. So we're going to kind of just go back and forth throughout that. So you, the listener, if you're considering making your own small event, and I am 100% encouraging you to do so, we're going to kind of try to give you some tools to kind of pick off of we had a previous episode about this. We're going to add a little bit to it based on the experience I just had. Sam, do you have any thoughts? You were a UberCubeathon attendee. Do you have any overarching thoughts, pros and cons, what worked, what didn't work from the player perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. In the venue itself, good vibes, good drinks. Lighting's a little dim, but I didn't have to squint too hard, so it wasn't that bad. Good judge staff. They were able to pivot, try doing things one way. It didn't work super great. They were able to just kind of adjust on the fly. Their experience running, good size events. So it was good. It was good. I had a good time.
Yeah, so it's not without its flaws. We'll put that there. And what was interesting is Lincoln reached out to me and to others like Joe Anderson and all that, and reached out and asked, how did you run your event and what worked, what didn't work. So from my point of view, when I spoke to Lincoln, I kind of told him you had to have a plan, right? So my plan was, what cubes was I going to feature? What was going to be the location at what I was going to feature? What were, I guess, the cost associated? What was my plan? What did I think a whole day of Magic should cost? And in my case, I chose an LGS. So part of my brain space was it air quotes, profitable and worth the time of the LGS. Yes, they want people to gather in their store, but to be completely honest, on the left-hand side of that, they're also a store there to make money, right? They're a for-profit organization, so the juice has to be worth the squeeze. Now, you've got Lincoln, who did a good thing, and Scott Mertz, who did a good thing. And in retrospect, I wish, I imagine all of us wish we thought of that. They did something for charity. But that goes into another bucket. We're going to do a left-hand side bucket and a right-hand side bucket. So mine was, air quotes, for profit, but with a payout to the players. And the vibes were there, but there was a cost associated, and it was in a store. His, after speaking to Lincoln, he was unable to find an LGS that could meet basically the requirements or the amount, the volume, the 64-player system that you needed to have. They couldn't handle the capacity for multiple reasons. So you've kind of got two different worlds here. So let's go to UberCubeathon. Let's go down that side of the chart, if you will. So the reason why I chose the LGS, one of the major factors is I could remove a certain area of liability. This was a conversation that Stu and I had had extensively, where things like fire codes and slip and falls and lost product and the ability to run large volume organizations. The LGS, in this case, it was the gathering place in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, was very capable because I had attended one of their massive events where they did like a modern 10K and all that. So they knew how to do large scale events. And then on the other side of the fence, you want something more intimate, smaller, and without kind of the air on the side of oversight. You kind of have the convention center or your house type of situation, or your church basement, or some kind of community center. These are definitely two possibilities, but you have to weigh and factor that. Then we're going to go back over to the left again. The store had judging staff already on hand because they ran large events, and they already had a means in which to pay the judging staff, so I had no out-of-pocket. That's going to be a major factor going back over to my side of the fence. I wanted to avoid cost associated with this. Do you have any thoughts on that, Sam?
Pay your judges.
Pay your judges. And I actually did come up with that. That was a conversation as well, too. I wanted to make sure everybody was compensated for their time, right? Because you're talking about 12 hours, 10 to 12 hours to run 3 cubes all the way to a top 8. That's a good estimation on a time frame for anybody wanting to do a one-day event. If you split it, then you have to split. Obviously, the time value of money comes into play. You got to make sure you take care of your judges, your staff, etc. So go back over to the LGS side of the fence. The location kind of met that vibe that I was looking for. On the area of the negative side, there's two things that kind of happened. One was the distance. It's about an hour from my house. So coordination and setup was a lot of phone calls on my part to make sure all the pieces were falling into place. In addition to, the stores typically will have the way they do things. So in this case, in my scenario, they already were using Companion. That was a tool that they were used to running. And when I spoke about, for instance, Gwen Decker software, the Hedra Network, which is beautiful and amazing and was at the Capital Cube Championships, that was an additional cost associated that the store did weigh and measure that, but they also had the means to run it. So this is kind of the pros and cons, if you will, right? And there's 1,000 ways you can do this. You can do this on Excel, but you're getting into your own little personal nightmares. Sam, you've attended a lot of large events. What's the biggest event you've ever been to? What worked and what didn't work?
I was at some of those Grand Prix back in the day that were hitting like 2,000 people. I mean, it's a lot nicer now, just that there's software on the phone. You can get your pairings that way. I mean, instead of racing to a pairings board. So we've come a long way. But yeah, it would have been nice if we did have the Hedra Network available to us at the event. It's really just designed from the ground up for cube events, where Companion is not. It's not. It's good at what it does, and this was kind of stretching it beyond its intended use, but they were able to make it work at least.
So I'll kind of put this in the strike against UberCubeathon, because Gwen did reach out to me. It's just my hands were a little bound conversationally because the LGS had their methods. But I think this is a good time to say too, and this is unofficial announcement, but I'm planning on doing it again in April next year. Like, it went so well, it went so swimmingly. We had such a great time. The vibe was right and everything like that. And I know what to do now a little better than last year, right? Because last year, anybody that described me, and we had a good friend that described me, said the redheaded or the ginger guy that looked like he was sweaty and panicking, trying to point everybody to sit in a certain place, et cetera, et cetera. Because I just wanted it all to be perfect, right? That's the end game here, is you want your players to come out of the experience saying, I had a wonderful time. Thank you for doing this for me, right? Or thank you for doing this for an amazing cause in the case of Lincoln and Scott Mertz, which, again, up that game, right? So if you're considering how do you want to manage this, these are all thoughts you can think about. And this could be as big as small as you want it to be. I took on the number 64. We hit about 50 by the time the numbers worked out. We had to make some modifications, which did cause its pros and cons during the scenario. And Lincoln almost hit 64. And then communicating with Scott, numbers are still to be determined, but you'll have to have a plan. So one of the major things that I talked about with Lincoln and then sometimes with Scott was to have have a dream. Like, I want the number 64. And for me, that's the perfect number. That's an intimate number, but it feels like a competition. People are in it, and it's bigger than our normal group where we're sitting with maybe 6 to 8 people. It feels important. So I like that. But 32 would also been a good number, so I had a plan of action for 32. I had what cubes would come into place. I basically had it all through like Excel spreadsheets on my laptop, which I brought with me. I had basically the easy button in place in case anything went wrong. So I would communicate to anybody that wants to do this. I would say have a plan. Lay out, where do you want this to be done at? Who's going to be the responsible parties for all the attendees? What software are you using to manage the event, or none at all, right? How are you going to communicate that to your players? What special rules are going to happen during this event? There's a whole bunch of things that go into that. And it sounds complicated, but it's not. And I'll go ahead and throw this out to the universe too. While mine's not perfect, if anybody's interested in doing their own event, please reach out to me. You can find me on Discord at UberBear, or you can find me on Twitter at UberCubeMTGPodcast, or you can find us at UberCubeMTGPodcast@gmail.com. And I'll be glad to share with you any of the cut sheets I made, the links to the cubes, etc., full communication. And you're going to want to have a flyer and all these logistical things that go into it, right? You want to advertise. But let's talk about Capital Cube Champs. So Lincoln, taking all this knowledge, all these ideas that he had learned from all the predecessors before, had executed an amazing plan. So Lincoln built a special Discord for the event, got people, we reached out to all the different, content creators, and we all talked about it, Lucky Paper Radio, Squares at Cube, ourselves, etc., and did everything we could. And we did the same with Scott Mertz and try to just really get some interest in the idea. So that's important. I think just reach out to all your different people. People would love to help you, KubeCon, etc. And then have a timestamp plan, which I will include in the show notes. But Lincoln was going to do 64 players over 3 rounds, and then you would draft up to the top 8. In addition to that, once you didn't make it to the top 8, you want to keep that happy meter alive and well. And how he did that is he integrated several cubes into a secondary event with pins on the line. And one of mine went in. It was the Monopoly, which we'll talk about that later. But huge feedback that I received from the players. He laid out in his Discord, for example, 7:30 a.m. doors open, 8:30 a.m. draft 1 begins, and this will all be here. 12:30 draft 1 ends. Then you go get some lunch. I mean, he literally laid it out, gave you locations for lunch, mapped it out for you. And that was one of the things that I had done, a lot more rudimentary than, say, Lincoln. Using my ideas made it even better, so hopefully the next person does it even better. What'd you think about, in terms of the minor chaos with ours at UberCubeathon, Sam? You were there.
It fired a little late. We were scrambling, just trying to make sure the last couple of stragglers were signed up, everything, confirm the head count. I mean, I went to plenty of PTQs back in the day. It fired an hour and a half late, so it was better than that. And I mean, big shout out to Lincoln if he really was able to stick to that schedule. That's amazing. I don't really know if I've seen anybody really get to stick to a schedule at any Magic event, so that's fantastic.
Another thing that Lincoln did right, and the challenge that we had, and the Gathering Place is one of my favorite stores. And this is something that I made my list of what happened, what didn't happen post my event. And one of the things I observed is they allowed people to hold the seat or hold the event, but then pay in a line once they got there. And that created that tension of, I'm trying to fire these on a very specific time. And we actually padded in. That's important too for you, the listener. We padded in time. We tell people, butts in seats by 8:30, right? Draft fires. That's the dream. What you really need to do is account for, all right, we're really trying to do 9:15 because we worked out the time factors. How long does it take to draft this type of cube? Time testing, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that's really important for someone that wants to do this to understand. The thing with people getting in line and not having paid and then having to run their cards, et cetera, did create its own challenges. Whereas Lincoln went through, Eventbrite, or I think I got that right. And I think that was just well organized. I paid when I wanted to do the thing. I paid, even if I didn't show up. What was cool is that the proceeds were going to go to so others might eat, which I think was executed so well. So I guess the point of what I'm saying in this episode is that you, the listener, if you want to do your own event, there's a lot of things you can learn from all of us, the do's and the don'ts, right? That's ultimately what happened here. You have anything to add to that?
No, I just think it's a lot of good takeaways, and I'm hoping more people are able to run their own events using all this information.
All right, so let's get to the actual event. So we've got through all the logistics, and like I said, Lincoln pulled this off like a master. And the only thing that I actually jokingly told Lincoln, the only thing that I gave, and it was mostly just to be humorous, the negativity, is there was no music. And I went up to him and said, Lincoln, do you guys hear bees during this event? Because I've been listening to bees like for hours. He's like, bees? I'm like, oh yeah, I have tinnitus. I need music. This is a me problem, not a you problem, but I should have brought my headset. So that I think we kind of talked about that too. I think a vibe is part of this too. Like my lights were dim because I'm in a shady bar, right? It's a shady bar LGS, which is the coolest place in the world, but the consequence is players can't see the cards. But the music is amazing. But then also another joke that Lincoln made, as he said, these people don't know what it's like to go in their top 8. Because when I said a top 8, it was like sitting in a Library of Congress and we're chilling, we're playing and no talking. Our top 8 was Lincoln versus Tyler. Tyler taking the ultimate prize here. It was people singing not so great karaoke with all the lights dim because they'd switched over to full bar mode. like battle tested the top 8, if you will, right? And we had to move and displace because this area is the karaoke zone. It was fantastic, but I kind of know that now, and people just rolled with it. Lincoln's was a lot more organized. So all jokes aside, it was just a wonderful event. So let's talk about kind of the cubes that I experienced. So one thing that I'm going to ask Sam, the player, I played to my strengths. I know what I'm good at. And the Hedron network allowed me to choose, whereas in our event, they really encouraged randomization for skill testing. And there's pros and cons of that too, but they were all about it. I lost that kind of argument. But getting to choose what you're good at allowed me to actually pursue that. How do you feel about like picking a cube that fits how you play Magic?
I think just using software that's built with cube tournaments in mind is going to lead to better cube tournaments top to bottom. Just the selection, trying to avoid cubes you don't want to play for one reason or another, and all the extra information too, like the pictures of the decks and stuff. That's good stuff. Any data we can get as a cube community is always fantastic.
So I went in blind. Air quotes. I knew the type of cube and what the cube said it was, and I used that, and that was good enough for me. But I know that someone that wants to take it all the way to the finish at CubeCon 2024, they probably want to pick the path that fits their play styles the best, so they have the best opportunity. So I did choose things that I knew that I could excel at as a player. So the first one I took on, it was Dozer's Artifact Cube, and it was made by our good friend Matt, and I will send a link to that cube. It was amazing. And what I really wanted out of this, with no expectations, is frankly to play a cube that was similar to Uberbear's Artifact Cube, but I got a chance to play someone else's that had pushed some power thresholds differently than what I had done, and I wanted to know like the cause and effect. It's not anything that I'm going to change about my cube. I want our cubes to be different. And one of the things I appreciated that this person had told me is that they built this, they kind of knew my list existed, they knew others existed, but they were very intentional not to study those lists because they also wanted to have their unique thumbprint. So one of the variances that I saw is this individual ran, say, Planeswalkers. And this individual ran Urza Saga. And this one also had a few tutors. And man, if I was looking at Uberbear's Artifact Cube, but on steroids is what I was looking at essentially. And I'm like, this is my jam. I'm going for it. You've got my deck list up. And what I want you to do is look and see what I kind of built. And I'll talk to you about it. We had some candid conversations, myself and this other curator, which we've shared our list, because I had things that I like and things that he didn't like about my list. And I think we can only get better from that. Would you agree with that statement and what you're looking at?
Yeah, I got both your deck list photo pulled up along with the cube list itself. All right, yeah, so we got a red-white deck, fairly low to the ground, a lot of 2-drops. You still got some top-end stuff. You got Urza Saga, you can find a Retrofitter Foundry. You got some removal, plenty of artifact creatures, Lion Sash, Arcbound Ravager. Like you're talking about Planeswalkers, you got a Karn right there. Yeah, it's red, it's white.
So I'll tell you kind of the gist of what I did here. So my thought, well, this deck ended up doing 2-1 overarching, right? And I got beat by our good friend Anthony Maddox, who just built, we'll call it the Machina. I mean, the machine was just devastating. Anthony he was the person I couldn't, no matter what I did. He had Mimic Vat. He had Duretti Iconoclast in there. So he was killing my creatures, and my ETBs would get shut down, and then Mimic Vat them out. It was not a whole lot I could do. Even with Lion Slash, I couldn't react quick enough to even deal with the scenarios that were being tossed at me. Anthony just built this. I mean, it was majestic what he built. So he's the person that did the takedown for me. But what I did is basically leaned into Constructs.deck. And anything that hated on the idea of the cube to a degree with stuff like we were kind of mentioned was cast into a fire, etc., because I knew I'd be dealing with threats as an example where it exiles an artifact and I have choices, right? But ultimately, like Karn was in there and Urza Saga was in there to start building these low to the ground artifacts so I can just increase my artifact count. And that's how I got my wins, was with Constructs. And what it really, I guess, edged out for me as a curator, this cube was wonderful. I loved everything about it. But also, during the play, I put a lot of things in here that I wanted to do, but no matter what I did, I almost played the same line every time. I'd use Urza Saga, as it was mentioned, make 2 Constructs, because I would time it as such. I would always fetch Retrofitter Foundry. It happened over and over again. And then I would go and get Karn Scion of Urza, and I would tick him down so I can keep making more Constructs. All the other inventiveness that I wanted to do, all the diversity that I have in the, because I'm doing stuff like Combustible Gear Hulk or Steel Seraph, etc. I didn't do those lines because it was like, why am I doing this? I wasn't trying to be competitive, but I found myself kind of leaning into a mildly competitive edge because at least I wanted to win the cube that I felt like I have an environment for. Like it was like home field advantage to a degree, if that makes sense. You follow my train of thought? So I kind of immediately started just scooping up everything that said construct. And I just wanted to get this giant, massive army, even though they didn't have trample and whatnot. I knew I could overwhelm the board, so I played to a strength. You were a person that played in you played competitive events. You were a grinder, right? I'm not a grinder. So when I sat down, I'm just playing like, I know I can do this and I want to have a good time. This was kind of the first cube of the day.
Yeah, no, you have a lot of familiarity with artifact cubes and definitely found a lane you were comfortable with. I'm looking at the list for the cube itself up on CubeCode right now. It looks like he's been updating it since the event. Right now it sits at 579 cards, which is a little bit wild right there. It's very unbalanced color-wise, which I'm in favor of. You got white at 75 cards, blue at 59, black at 50, red at 60, and green only 30. You got 57 multicolor cards, and colorless you got 153. Like there's artifacts for days in this thing. It's great.
Yeah, that's one of the things that our good friend Samich helped course correct me on in my environment. My original design was anti versus pro artifact, right? And then he goes, well, yeah, that's cool, but where's all your artifacts at? So we can all learn from each other. So I did kind of dig at that. But one of the things that we had some post conversations off this, and my only feedback, and I had some minor feedback, was in this list, this individual was running Jitte, and while their power bands are definitely stronger than my power bands, I advised against Jitte. We had the typical, curator to curator dies to removal conversation, but Jitte being an engine in a bottle. There was also, and I don't know the name of the card, I don't have it in front of me, but it was the one that attacks and punishes you equal to the number. It creates a treasure and then hits them for the amount of artifacts they have on their side of the table. It kind of, the conversation that I had about that is based on my experience of CubeCon, is you don't want to put cards in there that punish the players for playing your cube environment. I've learned the hard way, and I've taken the advisement of other people, like Andy Mangold, etc. They're talking about like Collector Oath. All jokes aside, it's a card that was literally like saying, sure, you're playing my cube, but I have a card in there that says you're not allowed to play my cube. So I was kind of, not to be the air quotes gatekeeper of what's right and wrong in a artifact environment, because by no means mine's not perfect, but I thought it was cool to have this ideas exchange, and that's why I was excited about playing this one, so I can get the look and feel. And the other observation that I had, my power band is strong, but his has wider berth onto it, or wider, it goes higher, and as a result, I felt like I was taking the vintage cube cards more than I would, and I can see during the draft that does impact a draft. Like if you see something that's so far out of alignment, like we'll say Jitte conversations come up a lot. It's such a powerful card, powered vintage in my mind, and I didn't get it. God, I would have killed for it. But when you see a card like that, I think it skews a draft, and that was kind of the conversation we had post this draft. What do you think about that, Sam?
Yeah, I think even in an environment where there's going to be extra artifact removal running around, Jitte can kind of nullify some decks if it can get out ahead. And I really get why that can be unfun to have on the other side of the table. I think it's nice to just have an artifact cube that really, really leans into the artifact portion. Like I said, there's a lot of artifacts in there, and a lot of powerful artifacts too. Like it's not just filler. Like I'm looking at the just how many 0-drop non-creature artifacts in here. We got Chrome Mox, Mox Amber, Mox Opal. Like we're doing stuff. It looks like it's going to be a lot of fun to play. I hope you had a good time.
So just hands down my favorite cube of the day, just because I love artifacts. But then I too won that one because our good friend Anthony took me down. So I posted to Twitter, one Anthony won, one Anthony lost. If you're wondering which one lost, it's this guy. But it was just such a great experience to get to play against Anthony. He was a masterful deck builder. The machine was alive. But let's move over to the next cube, which we're going to say I 3-0'd. We're going to say it like that, but here's what I mean by that. I leaned into my strengths. Our good friend Samich has a peasant cube, and it's also featured at CubeCon 2024. So I tilted towards, I'm just going to pick a cube that I'm good at with no intentions. Stu and I actually met up today. I had to go by his house, grab some tech stuff that I needed for today's show. And I said, you know what, I top 8. And I never really thought about top 8 before, because whenever we play together as friends, it's mostly like we signed the Ricky. Our good friend Christian's here in the room. So if you go and you wax lyrical and you just lay waste to the room, and everybody you take down all of your friends and you have a great time, and Sandwich's Peasant Cube, we signed the Ricky and we're done and it's over with, right? That's it. It's 2.5 hours of our lives we'll never get back, and it was a wonderful experience. Hey, does anybody else want to draft another cube? That's our typical Thursday night here at UberCube. I never thought about moving forward through an incremental growth on a list, right? It wasn't even in my brain. So this next one I 3-0'd, again, air quotes, and I'll explain the situation behind that. It was wonderful. It was the Peasant Plus Cube, which I'll include in the show notes. And I leaned into that because I'm so familiar with Chris's cube. We play it regularly, mostly because we're tuning it for CubeCon, and we're trying to basically optimize the card so that the players at CubeCon can have the best experience. I'm like, well, cool, I'm going to play a cube I like again. If I'm going to rock some cube, I'm going to do something I enjoy. It immediately became transparent to me the word plus. I didn't really think about plus. So Chris is a purist in the sense of his Peasant Cube plays to uncommon and pauper levels, uncommon levels, or common, uncommon levels. So it's pure in its finest sense, whereas this one had fetches, shocks, and all the cards that didn't really have in the early days didn't have a rarity level to them. I didn't really pay attention to that. I knew there were shocks and I knew there were fetches, and I thought that was the extent of the conversation, to be frank, while I'm drafting. And then I'm hearing players like, oh man, DT's in here. oh, I got Sylvan Library. One of my opponents had Sylvan Library and was literally drawing like every card against me. And I went with just Aristocrat, Sam. I just did it out with some standard old, because I was playing to what I knew, I guess, even in the draft. And you want to take a look at this deck list here and just kind of evaluate it. And again, the 3-0 story kind of goes on, and I'll explain that in a few minutes.
Yeah, so I got your deck list pulled up. I can see the rare lands in there. Just looking through the cube list, it does play rare lands, and it plays all those uncommons from back in the day that should have been mythics. But yeah, this deck, a little bit more complicated, a little bit more going on than the last cube. It's like you're, 3 colors plus?
I'm Jund. Up here.
Yeah, okay, that's your sideboard down there?
That's my sideboard,
okay, yeah. We're Jund. We got the beautiful Chris Rush promo Lightning Bolt down there. Just gorgeous card. Bloodbraid Elf, value, classic Jund. Viscera Seer, your sack outlet, do aristocratic things.
Yeah, I was like, so I want to give a compliment to this curator. This is quite possibly one of the most beautiful cubes I have ever seen in my life. And no offense to anyone else, but this cube was gorgeous, all the way down to the basic lands. Like, being a peasant cube, I was like, oh my God, this looks like, or the most gleamed out power vintage cube I've ever seen in my life. I was so impressed. And again, I just kind of played to what I know, but I found myself drafting with familiarity, knowing that aristocrats are uber strong in Sandwich's Peasant Cube, which, by the way, we're going to do a primer for that. The listeners should know that while you're at CubeCon 2024, that is a very powerful line of play. But junding it out on top of that was fantastic. We had stuff in there like Marionette Apprentice. I leaned into Mayhem Devil because the fetches were in there, right? I leaned into the idea of Bloodbraid Elf because the Cascade type stuff, and I ran other Cascade type creatures because I always wanted to hit my targets. While I didn't get the Blood Artist, I did get my hands on like a Goblin Bombardment, which really sealed the deal for me. So pretty much had every answer for every person that I faced at the table. The one individual that I played that had the Sylvan Library, which I wasn't expecting, to be honest with you, had the better deck. Like, their deck was performing, and such a nice person, by the way. And this is kind of how this played out. Even when we're done, he's like, well, maybe I shouldn't have Sylvan Libraried so much, because I hadn't revealed that I'm like purely aristocrat. So their deck drawing, they're just hitting every answer they need, but they've got down to like 3 or 4 life, and I'm like, you know what I mean, right? Like, my deck is kind of actively bad. I just need you to get close enough to the finish line, and I'm just going to do something silly. And that's kind of how it played out. So I won by, air quotes, the luck, because I'm leading into the idea of the Peasant Cube, and I was really playing this borderline purist. With the exception of the shocks and fetches, I really didn't see any of the really like broken cards in this environment until I played against them, and somebody's like, I'm going to play Demonic Tutor, and I'm like, that's in this cube? Question mark, right? I'm going to go get whatever I need. I'm like, oh my God, what am I doing? But it was fun. I really enjoyed this cube. It was, I can't tell you, Sam, how beautiful, including your type of cube, right? The Sam shiny one-sided cube, which just makes our eyes twinkle while we're looking at it. That's how I felt while playing this. This cube is wonderful. I hope to get to play this cube again.
Yeah, I'm a big proponent, and just gorgeous magic cards. Like when people look at their hands and they can't help but smile just because the cards look great, and really just tugs on the heartstrings, makes you nostalgic, stuff like that. But yeah, it's at least your deck. I don't see the whole cube over here, but the cards I'm looking at, yeah, that's good stuff. A lot of cards I can tell were chosen specifically for the art or for the border. Purposeful. I love it.
Yeah, the aesthetics were on point and the play styles were amazing in this cube. And when we went to the final 3-0 match, or the final match to get that reign, I played against, and this is another air quotes, the player that I faced off in this match. It was aristocrats versus aristocrats. If I'm not mistaken, they were Orzhov aristocrats versus my Jundish aristocrats. You want to talk about and we both joked about this. ESPN would never cover this. It's like slowing down golf and bowling at the same time. I mean, life gained, life lost. It felt like we were kind of laughing because everybody else is just doing their thing. We're on match one. They're closing out their third rounds across the table, and we're just locked with, okay, well, I'm going up to 27. All right, cool. I'm going up to 29. we're going to time. In that last 5 minutes, I think we knocked out an insane amount of matches because we just started playing sloppy fast, just like, well, let's don't worry about that. Let's just crash in. And then on the final one, it pretty much was kind of tilting towards a draw, but I had the leading edge and the capability of taking the board, but we're going to turns at that point. And the player that I was playing against was so cool. It's like, hey, yo, if you give me the pin, I'm like, hell yeah, I'll give you the pin. The pin's beautiful, by the way. And that was one of the things. That's the new thing, by the way, in the cube world. When you go to these things, is to get the pin. And I was like, yeah, 100%, take the pin. And I didn't understand the consequences of saying this because I just thought, like, I can just say I won. Unbeknownst to me, I've moved up in a ranking system, Sam.
Oh, no.
Yeah, that's exactly. So, curator of the Peasant Plus cube, which I'll share in the show notes. I mean, S tier cube. Both these cubes, the Dozer's cube and the Peasant Plus, I mean, I couldn't be more happy. Like, the experience and how the cubes played out were just excellent. And that's all I really have to offer about that. And then I want to say a special thanks. I'm going to take a moment. Lincoln, if you're listening, thank you so much for putting this event together. You know, if it wasn't for people putting themselves out there and taking these risks, these little small events couldn't happen. So, and also you did a good thing because I failed to mention it was for so others might eat. Lincoln's in this effort raised well over $1,000 to go towards that charity that'll help DC families to help, get the things they need to make it through the world. This is the type of stuff. Cube can be more than just a game. Would you agree with that, Sam?
Yeah, no. I mean, this is a luxury habit within a luxury habit. So being able to, use, the time, energy to help people less fortunate, that's really fantastic. Love hearing that kind of stuff.
Once we kind of concluded the Peasant Plus cube, I went out to the lobby with no expectations. Again, it's just not something I'm used to. I'm used to hanging out with my friends. We maximum do 2 cubes. So I went out to the lobby and I sat down with Team LPR, we're represented by Anthony Maddox and the crew. And Anthony was so kind to buy me a beer, and I'm enjoying a beer. And I've already had multiple at this point, full disclosure. I'm in vacation mode. In my defense, the family's out toward DC. I'm like, I'm going to have some beers, play some cube, have a great time. I'm the only person in the room drinking IPAs, offering them to everybody. And, finally we're starting to loosen up. And then they start calling out the top 8. And I look at the list and I'm like, oh my God, I'm number 5. And I remember everybody's like, I'm like guzzling this IPA. I'm like, all right, cool, let's go sit down. So now I'm going to sit down with the real players. I sat at the high table and I'm like, wow, if you've ever, as a player, and this was me, I want you guys to come inside of the skin of Anthony here. And I felt like I was wearing like the thickest wool sweater, and I had fogged up goggles on, sitting on the table. Like, everything just felt like, oh my God, I'm not supposed to be here. Like, you know what I mean, right? Like, first day of school feeling or something like that. And I'm like, wow, okay, cool. We can do this, I think. And I sat down, and we drafted the Penrose Cube. And Sam and I were just kind of chatting, sidebar, that didn't make it in the episode. The Penrose Cube is developed by our good friend Lincoln, and it is just a well-developed cube. And it'll be included in the show notes in regards to like table of contents. And I didn't look at any of that. It was kind of what's cool about this group, this top 8 group, is they let us kind of choose what cube, or they kind of discussed openly, what cube would you like to play, because it's being fed into the Hedron network. And everybody kind of said the Penrose Cube because Lincoln is the organizer. And to me, that's like how it should be anyways, right? And I'm like, well, not even thinking about it. I was like, sure, Penrose Cube, choose it. And I thought that was so cool for the top 8 players to lean that direction because he put all this work and effort into organizing this event. And for me, I think that's just the greatest, like, thank you to a curator. You did the thing, and he did the thing and executed it well. So if anybody's wanting to do a small cube event, you need to reach out to myself or Lincoln or Joe Anderson or CubeCon or Scott Mertz, and the list goes on and on, Dan Lupe. All of us will help you to get through all the trials and tribulations, what we did right, what we did wrong. That's kind of the gist of this episode. So now I'm sitting at this table, Sam, And I haven't looked at this list at all. I've heard nothing but good things. And cards start going around the table. And I played to my strengths once again. I'm like, well, I'm seeing like these pockets of synergy that really reference artifacts. I can do that. And I see these pockets of synergy that are also leaning towards aristocrats, like stuff with like Sir Conrad. So I played to this list. Now, I got knocked out promptly because these players, I mean, just to put it frank, the first person I'm competing, they're better than me. It's not even close. Like I consider myself a strong cube curator. I consider myself a pretty decent Magic player, but I also consider myself in full vacation mode, and I've probably taken about 7 IPAs over the course of 8 hours. So these are all factors at this table, and there's no music, and I hear the bees. So Sam, I want you to take a look at this list that I constructed out of the Penrose Cube, which I thought was gorgeous, and just kind of provide your feedback.
All right, so this list is real low to the ground. You got mostly 1s and 2s, a handful of 3s, and like you said, Sir Conrad way up at the top. You got removal throughout, you got recursion, you got unearth there, a lot of artifact synergies, looking at cranial plating, and there's goblin bombardment again, like you're saying, aristocrat and stuff. Yeah, it's real low to the ground. I appreciate that. That's kind of my player sensibility. Is get real low, try to get under. The people are kind of dirtling around. I think it's a pretty good list. I've spent a whole lot of time looking at the cube. I'm still reading through the big old overview Penrose Cube. The amount of time he spent on that kind of puts me to shame. What I did for mine, I kind of cheated, just filled it up with pictures. But it's like you said, it has a table of contents. A lot of time and thought went into it, but what I'm looking at, I think it's a solid list. I'd be happy to pilot that for sure.
Yeah, so I leaned to my strengths again, plus the vacation mode that we've discussed multiple times. So I knew what I was capable of, and I also knew that I'm sitting next to players that actually can play Magic, right? So I didn't want to look too intimidated. I'm the only person that's sitting there with an IPA to the right of me, like cracking open a fresh one in the middle of all this seriousness, right? And it was fun, but again, I needed music, Lincoln. That's the one thing I needed. If I had a little bit of Metallica, I would have been in the zone, but here we are. But I got knocked out of the first round, the semifinals, if you will, because the player that sat across from me had a lot more synergies and found the micro, I guess, the intricacies of the cube and played to that. Whereas I kind of played to I'm going to do stuff like Sir Conrad as the top end. And the card that I was really leaning into was Armix, so that I could sacrifice my artifacts and remove their creatures, not knowing the environment. But once I saw other players kind of lean into it, they had a lot more stuff like Converge as an effect. They were a lot more synergistic in their play styles, whereas I'm kind of like this amalgamation of aristocrats meets artifacts. I knew these things were going to die, and I was just going to swing in and try to get to the finish line. But when I was playing against masterful players, I could see that they had sometimes breached into 3 colors and really tied in like those domain ideas. They knew what they were doing. They had like that home field advantage of being, I guess, with frequency of play is what I noticed. Like the person that I played with, and forgive me, but I don't remember their name, but excellent Magic player, laser eyes. I mean, it was burning through me. I walked up post my loss, and it was bound to happen. And I just wanted to know, like, hey, did you see anything I did wrong? Like, what did I do wrong? And because I'm not striving to be a better Magic player, but it's okay if I could just learn a little something. Like, do you see something? And the one observation was like, I had a Blood Artist, which is a 0/1. And I had the capability of like putting a cranial plating on it, but I kept using it for Blood Artist, not blending the two ideas. I wasn't taking A plus B equals C. I was just keeping them A and B the whole time. I wasn't thinking these lines. And another thing that I mentioned too, post that event, I was intimidated. Like these players, I'm sitting next to like Zach and all these guys. They all know what they're doing. Like they're really good Magic players. So again, wool sweater, fogged up glasses. I'm not meant to be. I felt like a lot like Kevin Smith from Clerks when he says, "I'm not even supposed to be here today. Today's my day off." You know what I mean? I'm supposed to be in the closet hiding, right? So I'm sitting at a table, not expecting to even be at this table. No intentions of being at this table. While I appreciate it and I respect it, it wasn't like, oh my God, this is not meant for like, I've had IPAs. I'm here just to support a cube event and was okay with losing with round 1, right? So the expectations were there. So I'm like, well, I'm in it. I'm going to try it. But if I'm going to lose, I'm going to ask what I did wrong. And another thing we talked about with the individual I played against was, we'll call it like the stare, like the Care Bear stare. This player had kept like that shield, that face on, very serious. And while I was making moves, was challenging my moves through it was like chess positions, and they were asking me like trigger this, trigger that, and the layering, and the judge was there transfixed on it. It's not something I'm used to because I don't traditionally play that way, and this person was very comfortable with it. And I said, well, you just kind of got in my head. And he's like, that's what I was trying to do. And they did it effectively, which is interesting, right? Kind of goes back to when Christian and I were talking about, this is a long lost episode, but it was like poker and magic kind of idea. This person was a better poker player. And I'm just sitting over there like, I'm playing goldfish. You see some of that? You're a grinder. You've done the GP thing.
Oh, yeah. GPs, PTQs, all that fun stuff. And yeah, I mean, comp RAL is plays to different strengths than kitchen table magic. I mean, there's definitely times where I've seen people call a judge on an opponent because they did like a minor slip up they could have fixed in the moment themselves just to rattle their opponent, like stuff like that. And I guess sometimes you just have to attack with your 0-1. That's the takeaway.
What I got, because I saw some Twitter posts and all that posts from the players at the top 8, and the person that ultimately took it was the micro edges, the micro decisions, the little forced combat decisions. And this is kind of that next level type of magic that some of us are talking about. I would love to be that, but I'm not striving to be that, if you will, right? But it's not that this deck, I'll share this in the show notes. My deck could have won, and I've made the argument that any pilot that was a better pilot than me could have probably piloted this better, frankly. Not about the airframe. If I'd handed this to Sam, which I'll admittedly say is a better Magic player than me, he probably could have positioned himself to push further up that ranking system, and he's also comfortable in his own skin with doing that. Whereas me, as a person, I'm just there to kind of see if I can do the thing, and it's like whatevs. I'm not here to win. I had a great time. I got this beautiful top 8 mat. Thank you again, Lincoln. We're just kind of, let's do this real quick. Lincoln, thank you, Lincoln. Charity and amazing mats and beautiful everything. I mean, it's just perfect. The event went well, but that was kind of just an experience for me that I've never done before. I've never played. That was my first time. We'll even call it mildly competitive Magic. It's mostly me with friends. So it was good for me to see, right? To see, we've got our friend Kevin and our friend Thomas that will check every move. There's no judge, but I'm like, cancel. And he's like, judge. I'm like, dude, there's no judge here. We're like in my house, but they're just so used to it. They're grinders. And it was really cool to see that world. It was different for me. I don't think I'll ever seek that out on purpose. And again, it was like winning a lottery ticket. Like, oh my God, I won. It's like publishing clearinghouse for me a little bit. And they knocked on my door. But here we are. And I had a wonderful time. Sam, do you have any, you did the UberCubeathon. How did you feel as far as how did you position yourself? How well did you perform during that event?
Oh, no, I didn't do well at all. I was sitting right next to, with 3 players in a row, playing Sandwich's Bug Cube, all trying to draft Reanimator to varying levels of middom. Really just cannibalize each other's decks. It was what it was. It felt like the lane was there, and dried up a little later than it would have taken to pivot real hard. So that stuff's just going to happen. That's just part of drafting. Not going to hurt my feelings. The event went well. Sounds like Lincoln was able to take some of the lessons from some of the earlier events season and apply them. Sounds like it went off real smooth. I wasn't able to make it. I'm glad you were. It sounds like you had a great time.
I had an amazing time. Lincoln, my only feedback is I'll send you a soundtrack that I want to hear specifically. The others might not like it. It's going to be mostly death metal. And I will prefer maybe some country to throw some people off. But yeah, we'll do that. But yeah, this was well organized, well executed. We kind of talked about some of the logistical aspects of choosing an LGS, which removes the incurred cost versus getting a convention area where you got to provide food and potential, because you don't want to be barbecuing. I thought about this initially. I don't want to be out there running a grill while people are driving. Well, I kind of do, actually. I want to be able to do that, but I can't be everywhere, because that is something that, as the air quotes event coordinator, in this case Lincoln and friends, they worked really hard to make this pull off. And Scott's working on this right now, and I'm going to have Scott on and I'm going to have Lincoln on. and we've got a lot of catching up to do. We even want to have Tyler on from our UberCubeathon. Just the summer it's been summer, right? Vacations, poison ivy, all the things. But I want to get the teams together to talk about the best practices, what worked, didn't want to work, full candid, full honesty, so that you, the listener, you're thinking, hey, I can do this. I live in upstate New York, or I live in the central heart of the United States, or in Europe, or whatever, and I want to get people to come together and commune to be able to do Magic the Gathering, which is so important, and pull off these events. Me personally, I like the intimacy of the 64 to 32. When you get into the megalodons of this case of CubeCon, you're going to require meetings and teams and all that, and I appreciate everything. We can all learn a little something from this, but I want to see 2025 carry forth with this idea. I would love to see, and I got to see if I can negotiate this myself for UberCubeathon 2025, TBD, got to talk to the store. But I really want it to happen. But I want to see that, like, it's got some charity proponent, right? Because I know that I've worked with that store before, and we did Extra Life. We worked with Extra Life previously, so I want to try to do something like that, because people like Scott and Lincoln have inspired, I think, the whole community that Cube can be more than just your typical, I'm just here to play games and profit, right? I mean, I'm all about it, but I'm also, I get it. If you can help somebody in the process, you should probably do that. So intertwine it. But other than that, this has been fun. We're a little loosey-goosey here. It's all over the place. Team UberCube will reform very shortly. We're working on that. It's a matter of coordination, but we're going to get it done. New episodes coming soon. And I'm looking forward to just going to CubeCon 2024 and just having a wonderful time. Other than that, thank you, Sam, for joining the show.
I appreciate you having me. Play more removal.
Yes, more removal. True insight. All right, so let's move over to the social. Let's start out by thanking our Patreons. I want to thank Brian, Keaton Schultz, Lord Justice, Chris, Nicholas Lapointe, Preston, and yours truly, Sam McKenna, who sits right here. And I tell him he doesn't have to be, but, I love him all the same. And if you're interested, our MTG Facebook drafting page is getting humongous. We have surpassed 900 members. The activity levels, the sharing, the deck boast, if you will, pack one, pick ones, UberCubePodcast, Squares the Cubes, we're all interacting there, J-Bro. If you want to join that group, it'll be included in the show notes. I love it. Also, you can support the show through Alter Sleeves. Alter Sleeves just makes these sick slide-over double sleeves that'll make, like, your Urza look cooler than even the reprints. So, like, it's artist-rendered, extended borders. I try to do it for the bling. They're about $6 each. I have to check the MSRP again, but like if you want to make your cube look different, right? You want this cool altered cube, I'm all about it. Like you can pretty much find anything you want there. Highly recommend Alter Sleeves. Also, if you want to support the show, please use their Ink Gaming affiliate link. That's where we got our playmats that I'll be taking to CubeCon 2025 or CubeCon 2024 and 2025. And so on and so forth, and UberCubeathon forever, right? And I just think, and UberCubeathon forever. That's what we're going to do. We're going to leave that right there. We're not cutting that. And I think it'd just be great. It's a great way of supporting the show. I love their products. Nice knit all the way around the corners. They don't fray. I love it. Everything about it. The ink hasn't faded. It's amazing. Find us at Twitter at UberCubeMTGPod. You can reach us at UberCubeMTGPodcast@gmail.com. You can link us on the Discord. The Discord's blowing up too. We're getting pretty good amount of members there. The Deck Boast is probably the most active. Our genius Stu, who's come back to us, Stu. We need you back in the show again. May, we need you both back. The Deck Boast is going insane. Also, you can get us on our Patreon. And we've got a new Patreon, and this individual said, you don't have to thank me, but there's a secret Patreon. This is a cool story. I'm going to leave right here. No names involved. But it was really cool that this Patreon reached out and said, I don't play Magic a lot. I'm trying to get my children to start playing Magic. I appreciate your show because I'm learning a lot from it. And wanted to share this idea. Said, no need for thanks. I appreciate that. But it's still really kind. And just, it's a learning opportunity for the children, right? I mean, I want to build a cube. I want to get them to start playing with me on Saturdays when I can. But it was just cool. Really cool. I'll share that with you later. But also, I want to just go ahead and move over to our happy cubing. So what do we say here all the time at UberCube? Sam, go solo.
Happy cubing!